My own sister stood up in the middle of my wedding ceremony and called my husband a pathetic small-town mechanic. And the worst part was not the humiliation. It was seeing the smug satisfaction on her face, like she was saving me from my own happiness. She thought she was exposing my sad little life. But what she was really about to do was give me the perfect stage to show her and everyone else who I really was. Have you ever had a family member think they know what is best for you, only to be completely wrong? Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. And if you are here for stories where the quiet one gets the last word, make sure you hit that subscribe button. The whole thing started, as it always did, with a phone call that felt more like a summons. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the cool granite. The screen lit up with a name I knew would come with an agenda, Portia. I let it ring twice before answering, taking a slow sip of my coffee, embracing myself. "Audrey, darling, we need to talk about the wedding aesthetic," she said, skipping any form of hello. Her voice was a practiced blend of smooth concern and high-end condescension, the kind she used with clients and, well, me. I leaned against the counter. "What about it, Portia? I just saw the pictures of the vineyard you sent the family. It is very rustic." The word rustic dripped from her tongue like it was something cheap she had accidentally stepped in. "I mean, it is cute, I guess, if you are going for that whole homespun farm-to-table vibe. But your wedding is not a pop-up farmer's market. It is a statement." I stayed quiet. My silence has always been my most effective tool against her because it forces her to fill the space, and she always overplays her hand. "It is just," she continued, "I have friends, important friends who are flying in for this. They are used to a certain level of curation. A vineyard in Napa sounds lovely on paper, but if the execution is not there, it just looks like you could not afford a real venue. My fiancé Grant and I had chosen the place because it was beautiful and private, surrounded by old oak trees and rows of grapevines. It felt like us. But in Portia's world, if something could not be hashtagged as luxury, it did not exist. To her, I was just Audrey Vance, her older sister, the 39-year-old with a boring government job who had somehow managed to land a fiancé. She had no idea what my job actually was, and I had no intention of telling her. To my family, I was a policy analyst, a paper pusher, someone who worked from home and probably made spreadsheets for a living. I am not trying to make a statement, Portia. I am just trying to get married. Grant found me on the back porch later that evening, staring out at the darkening line of trees that bordered our property. He did not say anything at first, just handed me a glass of wine and settled into the chair beside me. He had that quiet stillness about him, the kind that made my own anxieties feel a little less loud. He had been a pilot for a huge international logistics company for 15 years, flying massive cargo planes across oceans. He had seen typhoons over the Pacific and navigated sandstorms in the Middle East. Portia's condescension was just turbulence to him. "She called," I said, finally breaking the silence. I figured he said, taking a sip of his beer. "Let me guess, she thinks our wedding is going to be a public embarrassment and that I should probably show up in a different uniform. Like from a better airline." I managed a small laugh. "Something like that. She called you a provincial pilot." He chuckled a low rumbling sound. "I fly a 747 with a 200,000-pound payload. There is not much provincial about that. But if it makes her feel better to think I'm flying a crop duster over Nebraska, I guess that is fine." That was the thing about Grant. He was completely unbothered by Portia's world of appearances. He knew his own worth, and it had nothing to do with brand names or job titles. Our relationship was not built on impressive resumes. It was built in the quiet moments. It was him showing up with soup when I came home exhausted after a long trip. It was me learning how to make his favorite meal just right. It was the easy silence we could share, a language that Portia, with her constant need for validation, would never understand. The first time she met him, she had looked him up and down, taking in his simple button-down shirt and worn-in jeans. When he told her what he did, her smile was tight. "Oh," she said. "Cargo. How interesting." Then she immediately turned away to talk to someone she deemed more important. "I do not care what she thinks," I told him, looking out at the fireflies starting to blink in the yard. "But I hate that she tries to make me feel small for being happy." He reached over and put his hand on mine. His hands were strong, capable. They were the hands of a man who could land a plane in zero visibility and also fix a leaky faucet without being asked. "You are not small, Audrey," he said. "You are the most capable person I have ever met. You just do not feel the need to advertise it." And he was right. I did not. The world I operated in did not reward advertising. It rewarded results. It punished mistakes. and it demanded a level of discretion my sister could not even begin to comprehend. That was a part of my life he knew about, not in detail, but enough to respect the silences. He never pushed for more than I was allowed to give, and for that, I loved him more than he knew. Portia could have her curated life. I had this. A quiet evening, a man who saw me for who I really was, and the peace of knowing that was more than enough. My family thought I sat behind a desk all day. They pictured me in a gray cubicle, surrounded by beige walls, analyzing data for some forgotten government department. Portia once joked at Christmas dinner that I was probably the person who designed those incredibly boring public service announcement posters you see at the post office. I let her have the laugh. It was easier that way. The truth was, my office did not always have walls. Sometimes it was a windswept field in rural Kansas, smelling of rain and diesel fuel. Sometimes it was the mangled steel skeleton of a collapsed bridge in Louisiana, the air thick with humidity, and the quiet grief of a community torn apart. And sometimes it was a secure conference room in Washington, D.C., where the silence was heavier than any sound. My name is Audrey Vance, and my official title is Lead Investigator for the National Infrastructure Safety Board. When a bridge collapses, a dam fails, or a critical power grid goes dark, I am the one who gets the call. My job is to walk onto a scene of chaos and find the one tiny, catastrophic reason why it all went wrong. I do not analyze policies. I analyze failures. Human error, material fatigue, design flaws. My team and I dissect disasters to write the protocols that will hopefully prevent them from ever happening again. I remembered my last major deployment, a passenger train derailment outside of Philadelphia. I was on site within 90 minutes, the scene still a horrific tangle of twisted metal and shattered glass. My role was not to rescue, it was to observe. I spent 72 hours with no sleep walking the wreckage, mapping the trajectory of each car, supervising the collection of data recorders, and interviewing shell-shocked engineers and conductors. My authority on that scene was absolute. I directed teams from the FBI, state police, and local emergency services. I once had to tell a 4-star general, respectfully but firmly, that his men could not move a single piece of debris until my forensics team had cleared it. He was not happy, but he complied, because in that moment, on that ground, my jurisdiction superseded his. There was no glory in it, just a heavy crushing weight of responsibility. At the end of that investigation, we discovered a hairline fracture in an axle that had been missed during a routine maintenance check. One tiny crack, overlooked by one tired technician, had led to a national tragedy. Our final report resulted in a complete overhaul of the inspection protocols for the entire national rail system. It saved lives, and no one outside of a very small circle in the Department of Transportation would ever know my name. And that was how it had to be. My work required anonymity. It demanded a quiet, almost invisible presence. I could not be a public figure. I could not have a flashy social media profile or a life that drew attention. So when Portia looked at me with pity in her eyes, wondering why I chose such a dull, unremarkable life, I did not get angry. I felt a strange sense of calm. She saw a boring, single-color canvas. She had no idea about the complex, high-stakes world that existed just beneath the surface. My life was not small. It was compartmentalized, and the walls between those compartments were strong, secure, and built to last. She could keep her world of fleeting fame in filtered reality. I was busy with things that were real. The dress fitting was supposed to be a quiet personal moment. I had chosen a small, independent boutique run by a woman who treated her work like art. My dress was simple, clean lines, elegant silk, no lace, no beads. It was a dress that felt like silence, like strength. It felt like me. I did not invite Portia, but she showed up anyway, sweeping into the boutique like she was a judge on a reality television show, her eyes already scanning for flaws. I stepped out of the fitting room, and the boutique owner clasped her hands together. "Audrey," she breathed, "it is perfect." I looked at my reflection. For a moment, I saw not a government investigator, but just a woman about to marry the man she loved. I felt a rare, uncomplicated wave of happiness. And then Portia cleared her throat. "Well," she said, tilting her head, "it is certainly a dress." I met her eyes in the mirror. She walked closer, circling me like a shark. "I just feel like it is not very aspirational, you know. It is a little plain. It is not exactly Instagrammable. Are you sure you do not want something with a little more drama, a little more sparkle?" "I am not looking for drama, Portia. I have enough of that at work." She sighed, that familiar sound of manufactured disappointment. "I just worry people will see this and think, you did not even try." Before I could respond, the bell on the shop door chimed and Grant walked in. He stopped when he saw me, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. He did not say anything, but the look in his eyes was all the validation I needed. Portia turned her attention to him, her own smile turning sharp and condescending. "Ah, the provincial pilot himself. Grant, so glad you could make it. Tell me, do you get nervous flying those little planes all the way to Omaha? I imagine the turbulence must be just dreadful." Grant's smile did not falter. He simply looked at her calm and steady. "The planes are pretty big, Portia, and they go a lot farther than Omaha. But thanks for your concern." Her face tightened. The fact that he did not get flustered, that he did not rise to her bait, clearly infuriated her. She wanted a reaction. She wanted to feel the power of her words, landing of her judgment, making someone else feel small. And he refused to give it to her. She turned back to me. "Well, I have said my piece. I just want what is best for you, Audrey. I want you to have a day that looks as successful as you deserve to be." With that, she swept out of the shop, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and quiet tension in her wake. The boutique owner gave me a sympathetic look. I just shook my head slightly. The happiness I had felt moments before was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This was not about a dress or a wedding. This was a contest Portia had invented in her own head, and she was determined to win, no matter who she had to hurt along the way. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, the rejection started to trickle in. Not the usual polite regrets, but a pattern of vague, almost dismissive responses from people I thought were my friends, people connected to my family's social circle. My cousin, who had sworn she would not miss it for the world, sent a curt text saying something last minute had come up. An old family friend who had known me since I was a child declined with an email so generic it was clear he had not even read the invitation. I tried to brush it off. People are busy, lives are complicated, but there was a cold knot forming in my stomach. It felt coordinated. It felt intentional. The confirmation came on a Tuesday night. I was sitting at my desk reviewing preliminary reports on a structural integrity issue with a dam in Oregon when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, one of the few friends from my hometown I still trusted completely. The message was short. "Hey, I need to tell you something, and I hope you are not mad. Portia called me yesterday." I put my pen down. My focus on the dam schematics vanished. The text continued. "She was going on about how your wedding was going to be super low-key and informal. She said it was more of a backyard barbecue vibe and that Grant's family was very simple. Then she said that if people had other plans, they should not feel guilty about skipping because you and Grant wanted to keep it really small anyway. She made it sound like she was doing you a favor by telling people not to come. Just thought you should know." I read the message 3 times. The cold knot in my stomach tightened into a block of ice. This was not just petty jealousy anymore. This was active sabotage. Portia was not just judging my wedding. She was trying to empty the room before the party even started. She was systematically dismantling my guest list one phone call at a time, painting a picture of a sad, pathetic little event not worth anyone's time. I did not respond to Sarah's text. I did not call Portia and scream at her. I just sat there in the quiet of my home office, the glow of the monitor illuminating the schematics of a massive complex structure built to hold back immense pressure. And I felt a strange parallel. My entire professional life was about identifying points of failure, about understanding how things break under stress. And here was my own sister applying pressure, testing the structural integrity of my happiness, assuming it would crumble just as easily as everything else she looked down on. She was making a critical mistake, the same mistake people made when they saw my quiet demeanor and assumed it was weakness. They underestimated the foundation. They had no idea what I was built to withstand. I closed my laptop. The dam in Oregon could wait. I picked up my wedding guest list, the one I had so carefully curated, and a red pen. With a steady hand, I drew a line through my cousin's name, then another through the family friends. I was no longer just accepting their regrets. I was acknowledging their loyalty, or lack thereof. This was no longer just a wedding. It was a field test. And I was getting a very clear picture of who was going to be there when the dust settled. The day of the wedding arrived with a soft, misty morning that settled over the Napa Hills like a veil. The air in the chapel was cool and smelled faintly of old wood and the white roses that lined the aisle. The guests who had come, the real ones, filled the pews with a quiet, supportive energy. It was everything I wanted. Simple, genuine, and free of judgment. Or so I thought. I stood at the altar across from Grant. His eyes were locked on mine, a steady, reassuring anchor in a world that had felt anything but. The minister began to speak, his voice a calm and gentle presence in the sacred quiet. And then a sound cut through the air. Not a cough, but a sharp theatrical sigh from the third row. Every head turned. It was Portia. She was standing up, her designer dress, a stark contrast to the humble surroundings. She had a look of pained resolve on her face, the kind an actress puts on before delivering a tragic monologue. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "but I cannot stay silent. I just cannot watch this happen." My father made a move to stand to quiet her, but she was already moving, walking slowly up the center aisle as if she were reclaiming the stage that rightfully belonged to her. She stopped a few feet from us, turning slightly to address the stunned guests. "I love my sister," she began, "which is why I have to do this. Audrey, you are brilliant. You are capable of so much, and you are throwing it all away." Her gaze shifted to Grant, and her expression hardened, dripping with disdain. "You are marrying a man who flies cargo planes, a mechanic of the skies. This is not you. This is not the life you were meant for. This whole wedding, this rustic little ceremony, it is a cry for help." The air in the chapel grew thick and heavy. I could feel the collective shock of our guests. Grant's hand found mine, his grip firm but not angry. He did not look at her. He kept his eyes on me, a silent message of support. She turned back to me, her voice softening into a tone of mock sympathy. "This is beneath you, Audrey. You are settling for a life that is so much smaller than you are. This is just pathetic." The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Pathetic. She had done it. She had taken my most personal, most cherished moment and twisted it into a public spectacle of her own, making a performance designed to paint her as the heroic savior and me as the pitiful victim. I did not cry. I did not yell. I did not even flinch. I just looked at her, at the smug certainty in her eyes, and I felt a strange, cold calm descend over me. She had just handed me the one thing I did not know I needed, an audience. And the perfect, undeniable justification for what was about to happen next. After delivering her final venomous word, pathetic, Portia turned with a dramatic flair and walked back down the aisle. Her heels clicked against the stone floor, a sharp, self-important sound in the stunned silence. She did not look back. In her mind, the show was over. She had said her piece, exposed the truth as she saw it, and now she was making her grand exit. The room remained silent, the guests frozen, unsure how to react. The minister, a kind man, with gentle eyes, looked at me, his expression a mixture of shock and sympathy. He cleared his throat softly, as if asking permission to continue. It was then that Grant leaned in close, his voice a low, controlled whisper, just for me. "Say the word, Audrey. We can end this right now. We can tell them." His offer hung in the air, a tempting release valve for the immense pressure that had just been applied. He was giving me an out. He was ready to stand with me, to unleash the truth, and watch her entire world crumble right there in the chapel. I could picture it. The shock on her face as she realized the man she just called a provincial pilot commanded one of the largest aircraft in the world. The dawning horror as she learned the sister she called pathetic held a position of national importance. It would have been instant. It would have been brutal. But I looked at Portia's retreating back, at the rigid set of her shoulders, and I felt something other than anger. I felt a cold, calculated precision. An explosion in the chapel would be messy. It would be an emotional reactive strike. And my entire career, my entire life, had been built on avoiding reactive strikes. I dealt in controlled demolitions. I met Grant's gaze, and for the first time since she had stood up, I let a small, tight smile touch my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was a smile that held a promise. I gave my head a tiny, almost imperceptible shake. "Not yet," I whispered back, my voice as calm and steady as my hand in his. "The timing is not right." He searched my eyes for a moment, saw the unyielding resolve there, and nodded once. He understood. He trusted my judgment, just as he had trusted it in every other aspect of our lives. He turned back to the minister, his posture relaxed, his focus absolute. I looked out at the small crowd. They were watching me, their faces filled with pity. They thought they had just witnessed my complete and utter humiliation. They had no idea they had just seen the first move in a game they did not even know was being played. Portia thought she had fired the final shot. She was wrong. She had merely fired the starting gun. And I was the one who would decide how and when this race would end. The ceremony continued, but for me, the real event was just getting started. The car ride from the chapel to the reception venue was surprisingly calm. We sat in the back of the restored vintage car. We had hired the soft leather cool against my skin. Outside, the lush green hills of Napa Valley rolled by, bathed in the soft afternoon light. To any outsider, we looked like any other newly married couple, peaceful and happy. But the silence in the car was not one of blissful contentment. It was the quiet, focused energy of two people who knew the day was far from over. It was the calm before a storm we had engineered ourselves. I leaned my head against Grant's shoulder, not out of weariness, but out of a shared sense of resolve. He did not put his arm around me or offer comforting words. He did not need to. We were past that. We were in the operational phase now. So, he said finally, his voice low and even. Was that part of the plan? Her little outburst? No, I admitted. That was all her. But she certainly set the stage beautifully. Did not she? He let out a quiet chuckle. She has no idea what she just walked into. No, she does not. She thinks she landed a knockout punch. She thinks she exposed me as a failure in front of my closest friends and family. What she actually did was create the perfect baseline of pity. She made sure everyone in that room saw me as small and her as powerful. It is the perfect setup. When the truth comes out, the contrast will be that much more stark. I thought about all the times I had sat through her monologues about her glamorous life, her important friends, her expensive vacations. I had endured her condescending questions and her backhanded compliments. I had listened to her frame my life of service and sacrifice as a failure to launch. For years, I had absorbed her narrative, letting her define me in the eyes of our family, because it was easier than fighting back. Because my real life, the one with consequences and classified documents, demanded that I stay in the shadows. But today was different. Today, she had brought the battle to my doorstep in front of the one person I would not allow her to diminish. She had publicly insulted Grant, and in doing so, she had crossed a line I had not even known existed. She was so obsessed with the idea that our wedding was not impressive enough. She judged the venue, the guest list, my dress, my fiancé. Her entire sense of worth was tied to external validation, to the performance of success. She was about to find out what real success, real power looked like. And it had nothing to do with expensive champagne or designer clothes. It had to do with competence, with respect earned through action, not announced through a megaphone. The quiet, pathetic wedding she had tried so hard to ruin was about to become the most memorable event of her life, for all the wrong reasons. We arrived at the reception venue just as the sun began to dip below the hills, casting a golden glow over the valley. The car pulled up to a discreet stone entrance with no large signs, just an elegant, understated plaque that read the Vintners Reserve. This was not the rustic barn Portia had imagined. This was one of the most exclusive private dining clubs in all of Napa, a place where Silicon Valley billionaires and old money winemakers came to make deals in private, a place Portia had been trying to get a reservation at for years. As Grant and I stepped out of the car, the manager, a man with a crisp suit and a professional, knowing smile, greeted us warmly. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, he said with a slight bow of his head, welcome. Everything is prepared as you requested. The guests who had followed from the chapel began to arrive, and the confusion was immediate and palpable. I watched as they took in the soaring ceilings, the breathtaking views from the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the staff that moved with silent five-star precision. I could hear their whispered questions. How can they afford this? I thought this was supposed to be casual. Is this the right place? The dissonance was beautiful. They had come expecting a pity party, and they had walked into a palace. We let them wonder. We greeted them with smiles, thanked them for coming, and offered them champagne served in delicate crystal flutes. We did not explain a thing. The best strategies involve letting your opponents defeat themselves with their own assumptions. And then she arrived. Portia made her entrance fashionably late, of course. She swept into the room, having changed into a second, even more expensive dress for the reception. She was poised to be the center of attention, the conquering hero who had tried to save her sister from a terrible mistake. But the room she entered was not the one she had expected. She stopped dead in the doorway, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. I saw the flicker of disbelief, the dawning confusion, the frantic recalculation as she tried to make sense of it all. This was not a sad little backyard barbecue. This was a venue she had only seen in magazines. For a moment, she looked lost. But Portia was a performer, and the show had to go on. She composed herself, pasted on a tight, brittle smile, and began to move through the room. She was on her stage, even if she no longer understood the play she was in. She had come here expecting to be the star of a tragedy she had written herself. She had no idea that she was, in fact, the villain in a story of justice that was about to reach its final, spectacular act. And as she accepted a glass of champagne from a waiter, her hand trembling just slightly, I knew the curtain was about to rise. All the pieces were in place. The audience was seated, and the guest of honor had finally arrived. The reception was in full swing. The low hum of conversation mixed with the smooth notes of a live jazz trio in the corner. Guests, still trying to reconcile the humble ceremony with the opulent reception, were carefully navigating their confusion, sipping expensive wine and nibbling on appetizers that were more art than food. Portia had found her footing, holding court in a small circle of her friends, her voice once again confident and dismissive. I could hear snippets of her conversation as I passed by. She was explaining away the venue, as a lucky break, a last-minute cancellation that we must have stumbled upon. She could not accept a reality that did not fit her narrative, so she was busy rewriting it in real time. I was not listening to her. I was watching the large, elegant screens positioned discreetly around the room. They were supposed to be displaying a tasteful slideshow of photos of me and Grant, but I had given the event manager a specific instruction. If a national news alert broke, I wanted it on every screen, immediately. Grant came up beside me, a fresh glass of champagne in his hand for me. "You are watching for something," he said, his voice low. "I am." He did not ask what. He just stood with me, a silent partner in my quiet anticipation. We had been married for less than 3 hours, and we were already in the middle of an operation. Then it happened. The slideshow of smiling photos vanished. Every screen in the room flickered, then switched to a live news broadcast. The familiar urgent music of a breaking news alert filled a momentary gap in the jazz music. A female anchor appeared, her face grim. "We are coming to you with breaking news out of the central coast of California," she said. "Reports are just now confirming a catastrophic failure on the iconic Bixby Creek Bridge." A gasp went through the room. The music from the jazz trio faltered and then stopped. Every eye in the room was now glued to the screens. The broadcast cut to shaky helicopter footage showing a massive section of the famous arched bridge gone crumbled into the turquoise water of the Pacific hundreds of feet below. A long line of cars was stopped on either side of the gaping chasm. The anchor's voice continued grave and serious. "Details are still scarce, but sources are reporting a complete structural collapse of a critical section. The bridge is a vital artery for the region, and the economic impact of this failure is estimated to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. The cause of the collapse is unknown at this time." The room was silent. The party, the wedding, the drama with Portia, it all evaporated in an instant, replaced by the shocking reality of a national disaster unfolding live on television. My heart ached for the people affected, for the community that depended on that bridge. But a cold professional part of my mind was already at work, analyzing the images, noting the clean break lines in the concrete, the pattern of the debris field. The investigation had already begun, and I knew with absolute certainty that my phone was about to ring. The shock in the room was a tangible thing. Guests were murmuring, pointing at the screens, their faces a mixture of horror and fascination. But my sister Portia saw something else. She did not see a tragedy. She saw an opportunity. She saw content. While everyone else was processing the news, she was already pulling out her phone. Her expression shifted from shock to a kind of predatory focus. Her thumbs flew across the screen. A moment later, I could see her face professionally lit by her phone's screen go live. "Oh my God, you guys," she began, her voice a pitch-perfect performance of breathless drama for her online audience. "I am here at this event in Napa, and we are getting word of the most awful tragedy. The Bixby Bridge has collapsed. It is an absolute disaster." She panned her phone's camera around the stunned room, making sure to capture the shocked faces of the guests, the dramatic news footage on the screens. She was turning a national emergency into a backdrop for her own personal broadcast. She even swept the camera past me and Grant, a subtle way of framing herself as the intrepid reporter on the scene, while her sad little sister had her boring wedding. "I am right here on the coast," she continued, practically whispering into her phone, "and I will keep you all updated. It is just so terrible. Remember to share this live so everyone can stay informed." It was the most shameless, self-serving thing I had ever seen. She was leveraging a catastrophe for clicks, using human suffering to boost her own profile. I felt a surge of disgust so profound, it almost took my breath away. Just as she was tilting her phone to get a better angle of the helicopter footage, the atmosphere in the room shifted again. It started with the staff. They subtly straightened up their professional calm, replaced by a new alertness. Then, through the large glass doors, we saw them. A line of 3 black government-plated SUVs pulled up to the entrance, their movements swift and precise. They did not have their lights or sirens on, but they did not need them. They carried an authority that was silent and absolute. Doors opened, and several men and women in dark practical suits stepped out. They moved with a purpose that made it clear they were not here for the wine or the canapes. They entered the venue, their eyes scanning the room, ignoring the guests, ignoring the luxury, their focus narrowed to a single objective. One of them, a tall man with a serious face and an earpiece, spotted me from across the room. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Then he and 2 others began to make their way directly towards me. The room, which had been buzzing with worried murmurs, fell completely silent. Every guest, including my sister, stopped what they were doing and just stared. The real world had just crashed our party, and it was walking right toward my table. The lead agent, a man I knew as Agent Miller, stopped directly in front of our table. He addressed me, his voice calm, professional, and loud enough for the entire silent room to hear. "Lead Investigator Vance," he said, his tone formal and respectful. "We have a level 1 incident. The director is en route to the command post. You are requested on site immediately. You have full command authority over the scene." I nodded slowly, absorbing the information. I glanced at Grant, who gave me a subtle, supportive look. I pushed my chair back and stood up, the silk of my wedding dress rustling softly. The room was so quiet I could hear the fabric move. My focus was on the mission, on the disaster, on the work that needed to be done. But as I started to walk with the agents toward the exit, my path took me directly past Portia. She was still standing there, phone in hand, her live stream still active. Her face was a mask of confusion, but she was still filming, still trying to process this unexpected turn of events for her audience. She saw me approaching, and her expression shifted, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. She thought I was being arrested, or at least questioned. She probably thought this was the most dramatic plot twist her followers could ever hope for. I did not break my stride. I did not even look at her directly. As I passed, I spoke to the agent beside me, my voice low, cold, and carrying the unmistakable weight of command. "Agent Miller," I said, "establish a media blackout in a 2-mile radius. No unauthorized broadcasts, no live streams. This is a federal investigation scene, not a press junket. Start with her." It was not a suggestion. It was an order. Agent Miller did not hesitate. He gave a sharp nod to the 2 agents who had been flanking him. They peeled off immediately and walked directly toward Portia. The entire room watched breathless. One of the agents, a woman with a stern, no-nonsense expression, addressed my sister directly. "Ma'am," she said, her voice firm and unwavering, "for national security reasons, we need you to terminate your broadcast and hand over your device. Now." Portia froze. Her mouth fell open slightly. The color drained from her face. The phone, her weapon, her source of power and identity, suddenly felt like a piece of evidence. This was not the story she had planned to tell. This was not her content. This was my jurisdiction, and she had just been shut down. The agent's words hit the room with the force of a physical blow. "Terminate your broadcast and hand over your device. For national security reasons." It was a sentence so completely outside of Portia's realm of experience that she could not seem to process it. She just stood there, blinking, her perfectly made-up face, a canvas of pure, unfiltered shock. The agent took a step closer. "Ma'am," she repeated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "The device." Portia's hand, the one holding her phone, trembled. This was her lifeline, her connection to her thousands of followers, her source of validation, her entire identity, and she was being ordered to surrender it, in front of everyone, in front of the very people she had spent years trying to impress. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, for someone to intervene. But no one moved. The guests who moments ago had been her captive audience were now just silent witnesses to her public unraveling. Their expressions were no longer a mixture of confusion and pity for me. They were a mixture of awe and dawning comprehension directed at me. They were finally seeing. Not the boring sister, not the woman with the unimpressive fiancé. They were seeing Lead Investigator Vance, the woman who could shut down a broadcast with a single quiet command. With a shaking hand, Portia fumbled with her phone, her fingers failing to end the live stream. The agent with practiced efficiency reached out and took the phone from her grasp, tapping the screen once to kill the feed. The small digital light of Portia's curated world went dark, and with it, something inside Portia seemed to extinguish. Her shoulders, which were always held back in a posture of supreme confidence, slumped forward. The smug, self-satisfied mask she wore crumbled, revealing the raw panic beneath. She was no longer a glamorous influencer reporting on a tragedy. She was a civilian who had just interfered with a federal investigation, a civilian who had been publicly and authoritatively put in her place by the very sister she had called pathetic. She stumbled back a step, bumping into a small table and rattling the glasses on it. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a desperate, pleading confusion. But I was already turning away my focus on the mission ahead. Her humiliation was a necessary consequence, but it was not my objective. It was merely the collateral damage of her own arrogance. As I walked toward the exit with my team, the silence she left behind was more damning than any insult she had ever thrown at me. She had built her life on being seen, and in that moment, she had never looked so small. I did not look back at Portia. To turn around to watch her crumble would have been an indulgence. It would have made the moment about revenge, and my purpose was bigger than that. My focus had already shifted from the petty drama of the reception to the concrete reality of the disaster waiting for me. The weight of my real responsibilities settled back onto my shoulders, a familiar and grounding presence. At the door, I paused for just a moment and turned to Grant. He was already there, his expression a perfect mixture of pride, concern, and unwavering support. The chaos that had just unfolded did not seem to faze him. He had seen me in far worse situations, covered in the dust and debris of real-world failures. This was just a different kind of wreckage. "I have to go," I said, my voice soft for his ears only. "I know," he replied. "Go do what you do." I reached up and touched his face, my hand still steady. "I am sorry about our wedding." He smiled, a genuine, reassuring smile that calmed the last of my lingering adrenaline. "Audrey," he said, "this is the most memorable wedding I have ever been to. Now go, be the boss." I gave him a quick, firm kiss. It was not a lingering, romantic kiss. It was a kiss of partnership, of understanding. It was a promise to return. Then I turned and walked out of the venue, flanked by Agent Miller and the rest of my team. The cool night air hit my face, a welcome shock after the charged atmosphere inside. The doors of the Lead SUV were already open, waiting for me. As I slid into the back seat, I saw the team was already at work. Laptops were open, satellite phones were active, and logistical details were being confirmed. My wedding dress felt absurdly out of place in this world of focused operational urgency. But it did not matter. The person inside the dress belonged here. As the convoy pulled away, leaving the glowing lights of the Vintners Reserve behind, I did not think about Portia's stunned face or the shocked silence of the guests. I thought about the families stranded on either side of that broken bridge. I thought about the immense task of figuring out what went wrong. I thought about the long nights and difficult days ahead. I had not orchestrated this night to punish my sister. I had simply refused to keep playing her game by her rules. The world had intervened, as I knew it eventually would. The truth did not need me to shout it. It just needed an opportunity to arrive. And as we sped down the highway toward a waiting helicopter, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Not the peace of victory, but the peace of purpose. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing the work I was meant to do. The rest was just noise. Back at the Vintners Reserve, the silence I left in my wake did not last long. But when the conversation resumed, its entire chemical composition had changed. The nervous, confused murmuring from before was gone. It was replaced by a low, buzzing excitement, the kind that happens after a lightning strike. The air was electric with what they had just witnessed. No one looked at Portia. It was a deliberate, collective shunning. She sat at a table in the corner alone, her face pale and her hands trembling in her lap. Her friends, the ones who had been laughing at her jokes just moments before, now stood in a tight knot on the other side of the room, whispering furiously amongst themselves, occasionally glancing her way with expressions of secondhand embarrassment. She had become instantly radioactive. The source of her power, the ability to command attention, had inverted. Now the attention she commanded was the kind everyone desperately wanted to avoid. The room's new center of gravity was Grant, my husband, the man they had dismissed as a simple provincial pilot. Suddenly, he was the most interesting person in the room. Guests who had barely given him a second glance earlier now drifted toward him, their curiosity piqued. A family friend, the same one who had declined the invitation via a generic email, approached him cautiously. "Grant," he said, his voice laced with a newfound respect. "I had no idea. Audrey's work, it is important." Grant, ever the calm center in a storm, simply nodded. "Yes, it is." The questions began to flow. What exactly does she do? Is it dangerous? How long has she been doing it? He answered them patiently, without embellishment, giving them just enough information to satisfy their curiosity without revealing anything sensitive. He spoke of my dedication, my intelligence, my commitment to my work with a quiet pride that was more powerful than any boast. With every answer he gave, the guests' perception of me, of us, shifted. They were piecing together the puzzle. The quiet sister was not quiet because she was boring. She was quiet because she was carrying secrets. The simple wedding was not simple because of a lack of funds or taste. It was simple because our lives were already complicated enough. The man she was marrying was not a consolation prize. He was a partner, someone strong enough to stand beside a woman of substance. Portia watched it all from her corner of exile. She watched the same people who had enabled her cruelty now fawning over the man she had mocked. She saw the respect in their eyes, a respect she had always craved but never truly earned. The foundation of her world, built on the sandy soil of appearances and status, had been washed away in an instant, and she was left stranded, a lonely island, in a room that had suddenly and irrevocably moved on without her. It was 2 weeks later. 2 weeks of 18-hour days, of sifting through wreckage under the relentless California sun of tense engineering debriefs and late-night calls with Washington. We had successfully identified the primary cause of failure, a combination of metal fatigue and a critical design flaw that had been overlooked for decades. My final report was being drafted. I was finally home, sitting in my own quiet living room, nursing a cup of tea that tasted like heaven. The chaos was over. That is when my phone rang. I saw Portia's name flash on the screen, and I considered for a long moment not answering. But I knew this call was an unavoidable part of the fallout. I let it ring one more time, then answered, putting it on speaker. Audrey? Her voice was nothing like I had ever heard it before. It was stripped bare of all its usual confidence and theatricality. It was small, thin, and cracking with desperation. I did not say anything. I just waited. I'm sorry, she whispered the words, sounding foreign and clumsy on her tongue. I am so sorry. For everything. I took a slow sip of my tea. You do not understand what has happened, she went on, her voice rising with a frantic energy. My life is over. The video from the reception. Someone recorded the agents taking my phone. It went viral. Not on my channels, but everywhere else. They are calling me the Napa narcissist. I could hear her take a shuddering breath. All of my brand partnerships have dropped me. My agent will not return my calls. My online followers, they are tearing me apart in the comments. I had to delete all of my accounts. Everything I have built. It is all gone. She paused, as if expecting me to offer a word of comfort, of sympathy. I offered her nothing but silence. My work dealt with the real-world consequences of failure. A collapsed bridge, lives at risk, a shattered economy. Her collapsed social media career felt by comparison like a very minor incident. Please, Audrey, she begged, and now she was openly sobbing. You have to help me. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding. You have power. You can fix this. You have to. The entitlement was still there, buried deep beneath the panic. The assumption that even now, after everything my power existed to serve her, needs to clean up the mess she had made. She had not called to apologize because she felt remorse. She had called because she was out of options. Her world had collapsed. And just like the engineers who had designed the Bixby Bridge, she was now desperately looking for someone else to blame and someone else to fix it. She still did not get it. She still did not understand that some things once broken cannot be put back together in the same way. I met her at a sterile, anonymous coffee shop halfway between her city and mine. It was a place with no character, no history, a neutral ground for a conversation that was anything but. She arrived looking like a ghost of her former self. No designer handbag, no flawless makeup, no air of untouchable confidence. She was wearing simple jeans and a sweater, and she looked smaller, diminished like a plant deprived of sunlight. She started to cry again the moment she sat down, launching into another frantic monologue about her ruined life, her lost followers, her shattered reputation. I let her talk, sipping my black coffee and listening with the same detached patience I used when interviewing a panicked witness at a disaster site. I was waiting for the emotional storm to pass so I could get to the facts. When she finally ran out of steam, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I spoke. My voice was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was calm and measured, the voice I used to deliver a final report. You are right about one thing, Portia, I said. I do have power. But you are wrong about what it is for. It is not a tool to fix your social media career. It is a responsibility. I cannot fix this for you, I continued, leaning forward slightly. The damage to your brand, as you call it, is a direct consequence of your own actions. You stood up at my wedding and publicly humiliated me and the man I love. You then tried to monetize a national tragedy for your own personal gain. The public is not reacting to a misunderstanding. They are reacting to who you actually are. Her face crumpled. She had wanted absolution, a quick fix. I was giving her a damage assessment. So that is it, she whispered. You are just going to let my life be over. I shook my head slowly. No. Your life as an influencer is over. Your real life is about to begin if you want it. I reached into my bag and placed a single sheet of paper on the table between us. It was a job application. Not for a government position, not for anything glamorous. It was for an entry-level administrative role at a mid-sized logistics company, a third-party contractor that worked with Grant's firm. The job involved data entry, scheduling, and paperwork. It was anonymous. It was difficult. It was real. What is this? She asked, staring at the paper as if it were written in a foreign language. It is a chance, I said. A chance to start over. To learn how to build something without an audience. To learn what it feels like to earn a paycheck for work nobody sees. You want respect, Portia? Stop trying to perform it. Go out and earn it quietly when no one is watching. The choice is yours. You can keep mourning the life you lost, or you can start building a new one. I stood up, leaving the application on the table. The coffee was paid for. My work here was done. I had not offered her forgiveness. I had not offered her a shortcut. I had offered her something far more valuable and far more terrifying, a beginning. I did not know if she would take the job. For weeks, I heard nothing. I went back to my own life, closing out the Bixby Bridge report and starting on a new complex case involving aging railway tunnels. Life for me moved on defined by work and the quiet, steady partnership I shared with Grant. Then about 6 months after the wedding, I got an email. It was from the HR department at the logistics company. It was a standard automated notification, Employee of the Month recognition. The name on the certificate was Portia Vance. It was awarded for exceptional accuracy in data management and a positive team-oriented attitude. I stared at the email for a long time, a slow, quiet smile spreading across my face. She had taken the job. She had started at the bottom, and she was against all odds succeeding, not in the way she had ever defined success before, but in a way that was real and tangible. Grant and I saw her at a family gathering for the first time that Christmas. She did not make a grand entrance. She slipped in quietly, wearing a simple dress and comfortable shoes. She did not try to command the room or impress anyone. She spent most of her time talking to our grandmother, patiently listening to her stories. Later, she found me in the kitchen. She did not apologize again. She did not need to. I got a promotion, she said softly, her eyes clear and direct. I am managing the scheduling for the whole department now. I know, I said. I saw the email. Congratulations, Portia. You earned it. She nodded, a small, genuine smile on her face. It is hard work, she admitted. Nobody claps for you when you balance a spreadsheet correctly. No, I agreed. They do not. But it feels real, like I am actually building something. Thank you, Audrey. Not for saving me, but for not saving me. That was the last time we ever spoke of the wedding. She never returned to social media. She built a new life, a quiet one, based on competence, not on clicks. She became a different person, or perhaps, for the first time, she became herself. The best revenge is not about watching someone fall. It is about forcing them to learn how to stand on their own. My victory was not the moment her world came crashing down at the reception. It was the quiet moment months later when I realized she was finally learning how to build her own foundation, one boring, honest, respectable brick at a time. The truth is, sometimes the people who judge us the loudest are the ones who understand themselves the least. They build their identities on fragile pedestals of status and approval, and they are terrified of anyone who finds value in the quiet, unseen work of life. The lesson here is not to be louder than them. It is to be more real than them. Let your actions, your competence, and your integrity be your voice. Because in the end, a life of substance will always outweigh a life of performance. If you have ever been underestimated or judged by someone who only values what is on the surface, let me know your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you believe that true strength is built in the quiet, not shouted from the rooftops, make sure you subscribe. Because here, we celebrate the victories that are earned, not given.